Hey, today I want to show you something a little different. Over the summer I took up welding. I'm already a pretty good woodworker, but I wanted to expand my repertoire into metalwork as well. So I took up welding and I needed to set up a space in my home to set up a welder. So I looked online for videos of people setting up home welding shops and I really couldn't find anything. So I figured I'd share a little bit of what I did to see whether it's helpful to other people who might be out there doing the same thing. I have a two-car garage, and I'm in the front half of one of the garage bays. So this is about a quarter of a garage. This is about 7-8 feet this way, and I've got a car width this way, about 9 feet this way. And the side that the camera is on is open to the other part of the garage. But on this side, I have a metal garage door on this side. I have a cinder block wall on this side. And on this side, I've created a partition. At the top, it's just a welding blanket that I picked up from Harbor Freight. And at the bottom, I've used cement board that are right on the floor. $3, $4 a cement sheet at Home Depot. I used 4 of them just to create a real barrier so that sparks couldn't creep under there and get to other places in the garage. A couple things also, I removed everything flammable from the garage, and I really mean everything. There's no charcoal briquettes or lighter fluid, there's no paper, there's no cardboard boxes, there's no gas cans, nothing. This is in my home and I want to be extra careful and extra secure. So I was especially diligent about removing all of those other elements. The reality is that when you're welding, sparks don't go very far. And when you're grinding, you can sort of direct them in a particular location. But I figured a little paranoia goes a long way on this sort of stuff. So to give you a little bit of lay of the land, at the center here I have a welding table. I built this myself. I started with just bar stock and cut it down and welded it together as my sort of first project. Over on the wall here I have a dry cut saw. I did a review of that online, and it's on top of a Harbor Freight welding table that I started out with. I do have the window covered with a welding screen, and that's just in case somebody's walking by outside as I'm welding. I wouldn't want them to catch sight of an arc and be surprised in some way. Just picked that up on Amazon for like 15 bucks. It was easy enough. And then above that I have a cheap fan just doing some ventilation. That fan blows outward. I open the garage door on the other side here just a little bit, even in the cold of winter, and the air flows right through, and it really gives me really good ventilation, and ventilation is really important. In the corner here I have my welder. It is a Miller-Matic 215. I won't get into those details, but I'm pretty happy with it. And then over on the right-hand side here, let's see whether I can pull you over this way. This does generate a fair amount of dust, metal dust, which is really nasty, it gets everywhere. So a closed metal cabinet is a great thing to have there. So this is a nice piece to have, but not totally necessary. And again, that's from Harbor Freight. Welding table, dry cut saw, welder, window with some ventilation, toolbox over here, and now I'll give you the detailed tour. So here we go. Let's take a quick look around at things. As I said, I built this welding table myself using some examples of what other people had done online, and I think it worked out really well. I used this sort of C bracket, and the reason why is I wanted to keep it flat, but I also wanted to have gaps in between, and I'll show you some advantages of that. On top, I often have my welpers, I often have my gloves, and then little bits and pieces of whatever project I'm working on at the time. Over here, I have a cold cut saw. I've done a review of this particular cold cut saw, and it's on one of these Harbor Freight welding tables. That's what I started out with, and it actually worked pretty well for me, and it works really nicely as an accessory table for this saw. This is also a great place for me to put things that I don't want to clutter up my welding table with while I'm welding. Here I have my cordless grinder. That's the one I use the most. I have some gel for the tip of my MIG gun, so that prevents it from collecting spatter. And of course I've got marking materials and a tape measure because those are being used all the time. Over here's my welder. It took me a long time to decide what welder to buy. I tend to be in the buy once, cry once category. You can find excellent products and excellent welders for less money. I think if I had not purchased the Miller itself, I would have bought a Hobart welder at Tractor Supply. I did buy a welding cart. Starting out, I didn't want to take on the challenge of building a cart. So I bought this cart from Harbor Freight. It has some drawers. In the top drawer here, some basic nuts and bolts, but also extra tips for my MIG gun and extra pencils and soapstones for marking and measuring. And importantly, this sort of gauge measurement device. This one came with my welder, but that's what you need to know in order to create the settings on the welder. You need to know how thick the material is. So that goes in there. Second drawer, I have vice grip pliers, I have some small clamps, and I have a little square back there. It's very handy. Third drawer, some gauge blocks that I made in my shop, a set of drill bits that I dedicate to this shop, and a couple wrenches and things that I found handy. Other little things I picked up, one was this welding stand, this gun holder. I can put it in the holder right there, and it keeps it from kicking around on the table. Another feature of the design of this table that I'm happy about is when I take my ground clamp, I can actually clamp it sideways into this area here, right? And the beauty of that is that it does not stick up above the table. So the whole table is grounded and everything that I'm working on is grounded, but this thing is just not in the way. So those are two really just good little doodads. This MIG gun holder and the idea of having a place to clamp that's accessible but not in the way. What I also did is I went to Harbor Freight and I got a couple of these corner angle squares, right? So these allow me to clamp things together at 90 degrees. Welding is, as far as I can tell, a lot about prep. Pretty cheap, and so I picked up a couple of them. So moving from welder to table and on around to this cabinet. This cabinet is a place where I store a lot of the things that I want to keep neat and clean, but I need to be accessible. I keep my respirator in here and my protective eyewear. And yes, you do need protective eyewear with shields, even if you are wearing a welding helmet. Ask me how I know. This big drawer is all my different flat wheels and brushes for the grinders. And for a while, I don't know why, I was keeping my grinder wrenches someplace else, but it makes sense to keep them in the same drawer with the stuff. Down below, I have just some basic storage for other elements. Above, I hang my welding helmet and my welding jacket and my face mask on some clips there to keep them out of the way. So let me just show you at this end of the welding table. I've got some clamps here. These are just basic metal magnetic clamps that I purchased at Harbor Freight. A couple C-clamps and another vice grip. But also I just attached a bit of angle iron here, and that's a great place to store my grinders, and I can get them on and off very easily. Multiple grinders is a real luxury. Here's a Makita grinder. It costs, I don't know, $120. Here's a Harbor Freight grinder. It costs $15. They both work beautifully. I don't think you have to spend the $100. I think you can start with the $15 and be a pretty happy camper. I do keep a little bin of water here. It's a great place to drop something that's really hot or quench something if you need to quench it. And then over here, I keep a little bin of scrap pieces. So the bigger scrap pieces I think I might use, I keep on top, but then the little ones are inside. It's hard for you to see, but the really little stuff is inside there. So there you go. There's a complete tour of the space right now. I'm just doing basic stuff so far. I'm a novice. I'm a hobbyist. I'm doing some sculptural stuff. I'm doing a little bit of furniture stuff, and as my skill set grows, my needs will grow. I think I might add a bender in here. I'll probably add some additional clamps and a vise. I have a spot on my bench already set up to add a vise as well, which is a pretty key thing. So one last tip that I wanted to share is when I'm done welding, I like to set a timer for half an hour, and I come back and take a look at this space just to make sure everything's copacetic. If everything looks good, I set a second timer for another half an hour. So I'll check this space a half an hour after I'm done and 1 hour after I'm done. And after that, I feel like I have nothing to worry about safety-wise. So there you have it, and I hope that helps.